asking, can we wash our dishes? Can we wash our clothes? Can we hang them outside? Why are people getting sick if nothing is wrong with the air or the water? Thousands of fish have been found dead in the local waterways, and some who live in the area say they've had unusual headaches and rashes. Joining me now from East Palestine is NBC News correspondent George Solis. So, George, there's a lot of anger and frustration there. What's the EPA saying? What's the trade company saying?
Good afternoon, Katie. Well, first and foremost, the EPA wants to let people know that their voices are being heard and that their concerns have not fallen on deaf ears. They're saying they've been here from the beginning and they are continuing to monitor the water and air quality. At this point, as you mentioned, they're saying it is safe, but of course that has fallen on some deaf ears because a lot of people are saying that they are feeling sick as a result of this derailment. Although at this point there is no scientific evidence to link that. Although some people that I've been talking to here say they're getting blood work done. They want to know what is in the air, what is in the water, especially when you start considering that there have been large fish kills and people are showing up to work or to school today with rashes on their skin that they cannot explain. EPA here saying, look, we're not done, the job's not done, we want to make sure that we really get to the bottom of whatever may have caused A, this derailment, and then B, whatever was spewed out there, that it is safe and it hasn't contaminated the groundwater or the air. So there's a lot happening here in town today. You also have senators from both sides of the aisle coming into town today to meet with residents. So there's still a lot happening here, and of course the big question is whether or not a disaster declaration will be declared. But all of that is still pending, of course, the investigation into the train derailment.
The images, just the images of that train derailment are completely insane, and you gotta understand their worry when they question whether they're being told the truth. After all, after 9/11, people down there at Ground Zero were told that the air was safe to breathe, and we found out much later that it was not. George Solis, George, thank you very much. And that is going to do it for me today. Deadline White House is next.
I just switched to Verizon Business Unlimited. It is just right for my little business.
Unlimited premium data, unlimited hotspot data. You know it's from the most reliable 5G network in America.
When it comes to your business, not all barbs are created equal. So switch to Verizon Business Unlimited today.
I've never been healthier.
Shingles doesn't care, but Shingrix protects. Proven over 90% effective, Shingrix is a vaccine used to prevent shingles in adults 50 years and older. Shingrix does not protect everyone and is not for those with severe allergic reactions to its ingredients or to a previous dose. An increased risk of Guillain-Barré syndrome was observed after getting Shingrix. Fainting can also happen. The most common side effects are pain, redness, and swelling at the injection site, muscle pain, tiredness, headache, shivering, fever, and upset stomach. Ask your doctor or pharmacist about Shingrix today.
Kids are so expensive, Dad. Now Katie needs braces.
Maybe try switching your car insurance to Progressive. Save hundreds.
I don't know, Dad.
Maybe try switching your car insurance to Progressive. You could save hundreds.
It's a great idea, TV Dad.
But I said the exact same thing.
Someday when you're a father, you'll understand.
I'm his father.
It's not a competition. Listen to your TV Dad. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save nearly $700 on average.
My mental health was much better. I struggled with uncontrollable movements called TD, tardive dyskinesia. TD can be caused by some mental health meds.
And it's unlikely to improve without treatment. I felt like my movements were in the spotlight.
Ingrezza is prescription medicine to treat adults with TD movements. Ingrezza is different. It's the simple, once-daily treatment proven to reduce TD that's #1 prescribed. People taking Ingrezza can stay on their current dose of most mental health meds. Ingrezza 80 mg is proven to reduce TD movements in 7 out of 10 people. Don't take Ingrezza if you're allergic to any of its ingredients. Ingrezza may cause serious side effects, including sleepiness. Don't drive, operate heavy machinery, or do other dangerous activities until you know how Ingrezza affects you. Other serious side effects include potential heart rhythm problems and abnormal movements.
It's nice. People focus more on me.
Ask your doctor about #1 prescribed once daily Ingrezza. Learn how you can pay as little as $0 at Ingrezza.com.
Start your day with Nature Made, the #1 pharmacist-recommended vitamin and supplement brand.
With their Verizon private 5G network, Associated British ports can now precisely orchestrate nearly 600,000 vehicles passing through their UK port every year. Don't just connect your business, make it even smarter. We call this enterprise intelligence.
Hey, that's some great service over here. Tire Kingdom with Mike. Did a really good job. Got 2 brand new tires. Really cheap. Definitely recommend them. 30 minutes in and out.
Kingdom where #1 best prices and largest selection. Call 7763400. We will be glad to help you. So shop at Tiger Kingdom. Best prices, largest selection. We are #1. Tiger Kingdom. Come ride with the winner.
When seeking justice for families means bucking the system, when the truths you accept lead to very different realities, when one voice inspires thousands, and when a natural disaster creates a movement for change. MSNBC Films presents an original documentary series from executive producer Trevor Noah that explores these watershed moments and asks how we got here and where we go next. The Turning Point on MSNBC and streaming on Peacock.
Hi everyone, it's 4 o'clock in New York. Before the January 6th Select Committee ever got off the ground, before it existed, and well before the first signs ever emerged that the Justice Department was investigating the Trump part of the Trump coup plot, before even Donald Trump's second impeachment trial wrapped up, one local prosecutor in Georgia decided that she would take on Donald Trump and the unprecedented assault on our democracy in the wake of the 2020 election, and she launched a criminal probe into the conduct of the ex-president and his allies in her state. Today, about 2 years and 1 week to the day that investigation was launched, we finally got our first real glimpse into her work, the work of Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. Portions of her report, compiled by a special grand jury that was called last year by Willis, were released this morning. The report gives us a sense of the breadth and depth of her investigation, 75 witnesses, a mountain of documents and data, along with testimony from the investigators. And there are 2 major findings with what was released from the special grand jury. They were inside the excerpts of the report released this morning, one of which could lead to major legal consequences for one or more of those 75 witnesses. We'll read from the report, quote, a majority of the grand jury believes that perjury may have been committed by one or more witnesses testifying before it. The grand jury recommends that the district attorney seek appropriate indictments for such crimes where the evidence is compelling. Whether to bring indictments for perjury is now one of the many important questions facing Fulton County DA Fani Willis, who has in her hand the full report with the recommendations for who should be indicted for their role in trying to overturn the 2020 election result in Georgia based on those baseless claims of voter fraud from Trump. Here's what the report had to say about those. Quote, the grand jury heard extensive testimony on the subject of alleged election fraud from poll workers, investigators, technical experts, and state of Georgia employees and officials, as well as from persons still claiming that such fraud took place. We find by unanimous vote that no widespread fraud took place in the Georgia 2020 presidential election that could result in overturning that election. Potential criminal culpability for the ex-president and his allies in the wake of the partial release of the Fulton County Grand Jury report is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Patricia Murphy's here, political columnist for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Also joining us, Neil Katyal, former acting Solicitor General, now law professor at Georgetown University. And Katty Kay's here. She's a U.S. Special Correspondent for BBC Studios. Neil and Katty are both MSNBC contributors. Patricia, take me through how this landed today in Georgia.
Well, we had all been told to expect that a piece of this report, actually 3 pieces of this report, the introduction, the conclusion, and this note about potential perjury charges, we knew it would come this week. We were told to lower our expectations about what we would learn today. We knew there would be no names, we knew there would be no specific charges, but I think by seeing how much of this has been redacted, and it's almost all of the report that's been redacted, it let us know that something that Bonnie Willis said was crucially important when she asked that this report be kept mostly private for now. She said she wanted to protect the due process rights of potential future defendants, and that was above and beyond any kind of perjury conversation that we were already having. So that let us know that Bonnie Willis is more than likely seeing this report to be bringing indictments. There are potential future defendants of the 75 witnesses that came before this grand jury. We don't know who that's going to be, but we do know that this is a process that will continue, that is ongoing, and that Bonnie Willis is more than likely going to be bringing criminal charges related to the 2020 election here in Georgia, which is just totally unprecedented.
So Neil, here's a partial, or no, this is a list of who is subpoenaed in the Fulton County probe. Lindsey Graham, Reed, Mark Meadows, Mike Flynn, John Eastman, Cassidy Hutchinson, former Congressman Jody Heiss, Brad Raffensperger, Pat Cipollone, the governor, Brian Kemp, Newt Gingrich, Cleta Mitchell, Jenna Ellis, and Kenneth Cheeseborough. Tell me what you make of this. The real bombshell from today is, as Patricia's talking about, that this grand jury, where the majority found that someone had perjured him or herself in front of them, as well as the fact that they interviewed, it sounds like, an extensive list of experts and officials and found no evidence of fraud.
Yeah, Nicole, so I think the report today, at least the redacted part we've seen, tells us 2 things. 1, some people committed perjury, and 2, there is no evidence that Trump won the 2020 election in Georgia. So Bill Barr would summarize this report as no crimes and Trump won. But in the reality-based community in which we live, what this report is saying is that there is a finding by this grand jury of perjury, and the people who testified before this Georgia grand jury are a kind of rogues list of folks, people you mentioned, Sidney Powell, John Eastman, Mike Flynn, Boris Epstein, and people like that. And, the Trump world is not known for being a bastion of truth. So in a way, you could say this news isn't particularly surprising today, but potential perjury charges are really serious with much jail time. And so any witness who wasn't 100% honest in her or his testimony ought to be very nervous right now.
And we went back and looked at, the plot to overturn the results in Georgia perhaps had the most public-facing evidence, both of Trump as the coordinator, the quarterback, if you will, Jeffrey Clark as one of his key lieutenants at DOJ, and Mark Meadows, who traveled into the state during these incredibly fraught weeks between Trump's defeat and January 6th. Let me show you some of what John Eastman said in December in Georgia at a Georgia state legislative hearing.
Your argument is that essentially we have a failed election that would require the legislature to step in and assign electors. Am I correct?
Yes.
I don't know where the evidence is. What do you say to that?
Well, there are 2 issues here. There's one, this extent of the fraud in the casting of ballots, and the other, which is undisputed, the failure to comply with the statutory scheme that this legislature sent out.
KK, Mr. Eastman is known to be under pretty intense scrutiny by DOJ, and it sounds like he's been scrutinized, his statements and conduct, and perhaps even his testimony by Bonnie Willis as well.
Yeah, what we don't know is who has been committed perjury against all those 75 defendants, who are the people that we think lied about something, or the Willis thinks lied about something, we don't know what it is that they lied about. But as you suggested earlier, there's plenty of evidence over history that there are people close to Donald Trump who haven't told the truth over the years. And on this issue of fraud, despite all of the evidence that we've seen from the January the 6th investigation and all of the evidence that courts found, or rather the lack of evidence that courts found, there are still people around Donald Trump who are still, like Mr. has been saying, that there was fraud committed. I think we haven't actually learned a ton more from what was revealed today in Fulton County, but that, I think, doesn't make it any the less important, because partly because of the consequences that people down in Georgia suffered. I mean, remember Brad Raffensperger's incredibly compelling testimony about how even his daughter-in-law, who had recently lost her husband, people were trying to get into her house. And I spoke to election workers down in Georgia who had bomb threats against them. People suffered real consequences because of this kind of allegation of fraud, because of the allegations that the election was stolen and that there were dead people casting ballots, or that the machines were rigged, or that the election poll workers themselves were fraudulent. And that's really important. That's, I think, as much as anything, why the findings of Willis are so important, because to clarify that the process itself was not fraudulent, and to give justification to all those people that have suffered because of the kinds of things that Ms. Griezmann was saying.
And again, there was never any evidence of fraud. We know that Bill Barr bent every norm that exists at the Justice Department ahead of the election to pre-investigate alleged allegations of fraud. He didn't find any. We know the 16 lawsuits failed to find any. We know, I believe, the Georgia result was counted 3 times. They didn't find any. But here's more of what Katie's talking about, the human toll of John Eastman and Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump's lies. This is Ruby Freeman and Shamos.
I've lost my name and I've lost my reputation. I've lost my sense of security, all because a group of people starting with number 45 and his ally, Rudy Giuliani, decided to scapegoat me and my daughter Shay, to push their own lies about how the presidential election was stolen.
It's turned my life upside down. I no longer give out my business card. I don't transfer calls. I don't want anyone knowing my name. I don't want to go anywhere with my mom because she might yell my name out over the grocery aisle or something. I don't go to the grocery store at all. I haven't been anywhere at all.
Patricia, how central were the victims? I mean, I think at a national level, we focus so much on Harry Dunn and Michael Fanone and the officers who engaged in what they described as medieval combat with Trump supporters. But I think in Georgia, that moment where Ruby Freeman and Shamos testify about how their life is still today destroyed, unrecognizable from before the lies told by Trump and Rudy and John Eastman and others. How much do you think that weighed on Fani Willis, the victims of these lies in her state?
So I think those statements were hugely important, because it goes to the fact that this was not, if it was a crime, it certainly wasn't a victimless crime. It wasn't just statements that came and went. In addition to Shamos and her mother, hundreds and hundreds of Georgia election workers were under very similar kinds of scrutiny, allegations. Many of them had death threats coming into their homes. Many of them had to leave their homes, all because of these lies that were spinning out so constantly from the Trump campaign. And then above and beyond the human toll, you have to really look at the really significant changes that Republican lawmakers made to the laws in the state of Georgia, the voting laws, following those allegations from Donald Trump. Republican lawmakers passed a sweeping overhaul of our election laws with Senate Bill 202. That was just happening in the shadow of all of this controversy, when Republican voters were calling their own state senators and state lawmakers and saying, we don't believe that this election was fair and square. You have to go in and make sure that these laws are changed. And so we are now living with an entirely new set of election laws because of those allegations, which were never proven true. In fact, they were repeatedly proven untrue, but we still have these consequences that the state of Georgia is going to live with in perpetuity.
Well, I mean, and to your point, the hypocrisy of Gabe Sterling and Brad Raffensperger, who came out on the non-participatory side of the country and every Georgian didn't exist in Georgia. There was no fraud, they said. How do you square those two things in the state?
What we're hearing from Republican lawmakers is that they felt like they had to take something back to their voters, that their own voters had so completely lost faith in elections from then and into the future unless something changed. They would never believe another election again if they didn't go in and start making significant changes to the laws. Obviously, Democrats in the state said, well, that is ridiculous because Joe Biden won, but all of you guys won your elections. That really was not important in the conversation. What was important was this intense pressure on lawmakers from their own GOP voters who believed Donald Trump, believed all of these people who came in on behalf of Donald Trump and said that election was stolen and it can't be trusted, and no elections can be trusted in the future unless everything changes.
And the cognitive dissonance of Kemp, Raffensperger, Sterling saying the election was free from fraud, and then every official in the state backing a lot to make it more difficult to vote because the Trump base was so squawky and agitated is stunning. It should never be overlooked as one of the prices of Donald Trump's lies. Ruby Freeman and Shane Moss lost their name, and as Patricia Riley points out, so did hundreds of other election officials because of the lies told, not just nationally, but in their state. Here's Rudy Giuliani testifying before the Georgia State Legislature.
Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, since it's not a machine you want counting your votes. Second, so I don't consider that a partisan issue at all. But it does cast doubt on the entire legitimacy of the vote. And the fact that you have the power to do this, the state law doesn't in any way prevent you, the legislature, from immediately taking this over and deciding this. That power, right, obligation is given to you by the founding fathers, deliberately.
So those were lies told about Dominion and Smartmatic specifically. Now they're the subject of a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit against Fox News and other outlets. And Rudy Giuliani is having to defend telling those lies. We focus a lot on that lawsuit, but the laws were peddled in Georgia as well. Do you think that he or anyone will face consequences for them?
100% I do. So I think the clip you just showed is paired so nicely against the prior clips you showed from the election workers and Caddy's really excellent point about the victims. Because there's a way of thinking about all this Georgia stuff that is technical, it's about vote counting, and people's eyes glaze over and so on. But what Caddy has done and those clips do is they remind us of the deep human consequences. And why is that important? Because as a prosecutor, I've had the privilege of teaching criminal law for 20 years in Georgetown, the ultimate job of a prosecutor is to enforce the law and protect the weak. And here you've really got a circumstance in which these really powerful people from New York and Washington, all the way up to the President of the United States, are going and telling these lies. And while the lies may sound technical, they have the deepest of consequences to human beings. And when Fannie Willis, the DA, is thinking about what to do, her core mission is to enforce the rule of law even-handedly, to protect those without power. And the story told here is one in which some people lied before the grand jury to try and keep this lie going about the election fraud and like. The grand jury listened to all that evidence and they said there's nothing to it, there was no election fraud, and they found indeed that people lied. That is the essence of a prosecution. There's no doubt in my mind that she's going to conclude that people are going to be prosecuted for this. The big million-dollar question is, will she conclude that about Donald Trump himself, or will she do it with respect to Rudy and the others in the rogues gallery?
So Rudy Giuliani and Johnny Spin weren't the only people who traveled to Georgia to peddle Donald Trump's lie of fraud, which he was assured in the moment wasn't true by his own surrogates in the state, the Republican governor, the Republican secretary of state, and his lieutenants. But here's what the January 6th committee found and reported on about Mark Meadows' visit to Georgia, Caddy. Quote, when Meadows made a visit on short notice to examine the audit of absentee ballots in Cobb County, Georgia, he spoke to Deputy Secretary of State Jordan Fuchs and Francis Watson, the Secretary of State's chief investigator. Ultimately, Meadows connected Watson with the president, who claimed he'd won the election and pressed her to say that he had won, to say it. The Select Committee obtained a copy of their recorded phone call, which is detailed below. The president told Watson that he had, quote, won Georgia by a lot, end quote. Quote, you have the most important job in the country right now, he told her, and suggested when the right answer comes out, you'll be praised. 4 days later, Meadows texted Deputy Secretary of State Fuchs, in which he asked, quote, is there a way to speed up Fulton County signature verification in order to have results before January 6th if the Trump campaign assists financially? Fuchs responds that she, quote, will answer ASAP. So again, Kathy, I'm confronted every day on this show with the reality that I'm not a lawyer. This sounds to me like Donald Trump got on the phone and directed state officials to, quote, find enough votes to make him win a state that he knew he lost. And then Meadows offered to pay for it?
Yeah, I mean, you can see echoes in other areas, right? You can see a little bit of echoes of Cassidy Hutchinson, who had a lawyer who was paid for by supporters of Donald Trump, and then when she switched her lawyer, she started saying very different things again with the sick, but also that tone of we know you're going to do the right thing that we know that people around Donald Trump have used with people who were witnesses in potential charges against the former president or investigations into the former president. So there is, and there is different, and that what you just read out now is very similar to what Donald Trump said. I know I won by a lot without producing the evidence for it, and then Meadows involved with it too. But I think all of this is not, it's the human consequences of what these people were doing and the pressure that we know Raffensperger himself was under and Fuchs was under too. But it's also then the undermining of the system itself. And that is the other consequence of this, is the individuals who are there to try to protect the system, but what they really worry about is that people stop believing about the next election and the election after that. And I guess that's perhaps, their argument for why they had to have some kind of legal changes in the state, even though there's a dissonance, as you say, if there was a problem, why would you have the legal changes? But it damages individuals and it undermines the system. It makes it harder to find election workers. Election workers quit at a higher rate. They don't think the job is safe. And that's not good for American democracy. And behind it are these people, in positions of power who aren't from the state, pulling strings to get what they want.
Perfectly put. Patricia Murphy, thank you for starting us off. We're so grateful to have your contributions, and thank you for bringing it back to that law that was so objectionable that Major League Baseball moved the All-Star game out of Georgia. Neil and Kathy, stick around. When we come back, it wasn't just officials in the state of Georgia who faced pressure from the twice impeached ex-president and his merry band of loyalists and sycophants. How election officials in other states push back against the big lie and similar dark ops and are still asking for accountability today. Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson will join us. Plus, the Justice Department Special Counsel Jack Smith is moving things along in the investigation into the ex-president's role in the attack of January 6th, reportedly issuing a subpoena for someone we've been talking about, Trump's White House Chief of Staff, a man involved in all things that took place in the Oval Office that day. We'll look at that later in the program. On the ground in East Palestine, Ohio, at the site of the train derailment, which has spilled hazardous chemicals into that town. The head of the EPA and the state's 2 senators visiting with residents wanting answers, and today. All those stories and more when Deadline White House continues after a quick break. Don't go anywhere.
Since taking this out, we ensure I can work each muscle group, sometimes up to 3 times a week.
My recovery is much
So
quicker.
not only that, you stand up there, you
feel better, race better, you recover better. I didn't think I was ever going to be that strong, honestly.
but the phone is working.
You have a game changer.
So not my phone you have there. So you
Start
say
now
you
by
like,
going to balanceofnature.com and
You
don't
say you
forget to
don't
use discount code LOVE.
I don't know.
Is 101 years old this year and counting. I'm Bill Lockwood,
Let me go on the
caretaker and owner. When COVID hit, we had
I
to
think I
go
like
like
that.
a lot of businesses did. I heard about the payroll tax refund allowed us to keep the amount of people that we needed and the people that have been here taking care of us.
See if your business may qualify.
Okay, he doesn't close the door. Mosquitoes get in inviting people more and close the door. That's what it is.
45, I realize I'm no spring
Not
chicken.
I know what's right for me. I got a plan, do it, just stick it.
My doc, throw me the script.
There goes celebration. Scared the chicken nugget out of me. That was loud.
So when both of them living almost together,
They were supposed to both leave at 5, and the celebration left before it. The Pride is leaving after celebration. Wow, celebration is out now.
Definitely recommend them. 30 minutes in and out.
so long as I don't inside the viewing thing.
Not that long, since 4:33. That was loud. That was loud.
Kingdom. You want me to warm some bread for you?
I'm good.
So why you don't fix your thing for when she come for whoever coming?
Because I'm doing this.
Huh?
Because I'm doing this.
You'll save more than $1,000 versus Verizon. And with Price Lock Guarantee, we'll never raise your rate plan. So you can keep your focus on pro terms and making sure the sauce is extra spicy. At T-Mobile,
Hello.
there are no small businesses.
Qu'est-ce que vous passez moi ici à mon marché, je marche là.
The violent criminals on the streets and the white-collar criminals in their office booths.
Eh?
That wasn't Zico.
That was Juma.
I don't know.
Mr. Secretary, why didn't you just quit and walk away?
Because I knew that we had followed the law, we had followed the Constitution. And I think sometimes moments require you to stand up and just take the shots, you're doing your job. That's all we did. You know, just followed the law, we followed the Constitution. And at the end of the day, President came up short.
That was Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, on why he resisted the intense pressure we've been talking about that he felt and that was applied by the ex-president and his allies to manufacture evidence of election fraud, of which, of course, there was never any. Raffensperger was one of many state-level officials, most of them Republicans, many of them Republicans, in Georgia and across the battleground states.
Kind of sounded like Bora Memorial.
Close the door, mosquitoes coming in.
Not yet.
Huh?
Not yet.
All else failed to the violent insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. Joining us now, someone who was on the receiving end of smears and attacks, Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. Neil and Patty are still here. Madam Secretary, I want to show something that you said about what this was like for you, because we're focusing on Raffensperger, but from the Trump side, this was a national effort.
Even the president himself had called on me to be arrested and tried for treason, potentially executed.
To hear that the president of